My name is Lamorna and I am the author of Dark Salt Clear, Life in a Cornish Fishing Town, which came out April 2020, right bang in the middle of the start of the pandemic. I've been in Santa Madalena for 3 weeks. Before that, I was working full-time at an education charity, and this is the first time in almost 2 years that I've had just to write and to speak with other writers about my writing and to try and take myself seriously as a writer, which is something that I've definitely struggled to do, and I don't quite know how I've become a writer in the first place. So it has meant a huge amount just to get that time to think and to write and to speak to other writers about their processes as well. Dark Salt Clear came out of, I'd studied anthropology as a master's, and for my fieldwork I decided to go to Cornwall, which is where my mum is from, and I wanted to research the fishing industry because it's such a big part of Cornwall and its sort of perception of its own identity. And I spent a month there going out on deep sea trawlers and crabbing boats and ring netters and gill netters and any kind of fishing boat that I could, and getting really drunk with fishermen in the pubs and asking them what it meant to be a fisherman to them. And after that, I wrote a piece about being on a trawler. I'd been reading Sebald's The Rings of Saturn whilst I was on the trawler, and some of the things that he was saying, I think maybe because I also had seasickness and was taking a lot of seasickness medication, I really equated his writing with my experiences on the trawler. And so I wrote this piece about that, and I was incredibly lucky in that it got picked up by a publisher. And the publisher asked me if I wanted to write a book, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to, but I have no idea how to. Part of what I love about anthropology is that it's a very anxious discipline. I think that suits me. Anthropologists, particularly in the 21st century, due to anthropology's quite colonial history of going to places and saying, this is what these people are, and returning and acting as if they were the voice of reason and there were no other possible narratives. Now anthropologists see that wherever they go, people are responding to them in a particular way. There's a power dynamic that's happening. And an anthropologist has to notice themselves. It's an incredibly subjective discipline. They have to see that the patterns that they're creating might just be that particular week. It might be something that they see. So when I was in Cornwall, I was thinking a lot about why was I there? How come I was the person who got to do this? And to understand that my vision of what the fisherman was like was not the kind of totality. But I also found that gap between the way they saw themselves and the way I was seeing them and the way I saw myself whilst I was out living in this small town was actually quite a fertile territory itself. I learnt a lot about the difference between my voice as narrator and the people who I was narrating the lives of. And I had to learn how to shift from an anthropological quite a really kind of the language of anthropologists is often quite clunky, strange vocabulary, and I had to suddenly write for a wider audience and write in a way that I hoped that the people I was studying would also be able to read the book. Whilst at Santa Madalena, I've continued my interest in anthropology. I've been writing a big literary piece about two novels that are about anthropologists, or that place anthropologists as narrators. One of the books is by Lynn Tillman, and it's called Men and Apparitions. And the other is by Tom McCarthy, and that one is called Saturn Island. They both came out in the last 5 years, so they're very recent books. And I was looking at how an anthropologist is both a valuable narrator because of their interest in detail and patterns and how communities work, and that kind of obsessive nature of an anthropologist who might focus in on, say, genes and just think about genes for 2 years and how that shapes a particular community. And then I also wanted to look at the limitations. So anthropologists, by their nature, are always missing things. And it's beautifully dramatised in Lynn Tillman's book, because she notices these mistakes that an anthropologist can make, and how even someone who suggests that their whole career is going to be about understanding the world, they can be blind to other things. So the story begins in earnest when this anthropologist narrator's wife cheats on him with his best friend, and he had no idea. And after that, it causes him to completely rethink his understanding of anthropology and his practice. And he realizes the only thing that he can then study for the rest of his days is men like himself, like the subsection of white American men who are privileged like him. And I think that there's a kind of tragedy in that, but it's also so interesting. So rarely are we told why it is that academics are drawn to their particular subject. So to actually understand the personality and the situation driving that in a personal level is really interesting. Whereas the Tom McCarthy book, he seems to, or the anthropologist misunderstands that you can't know everything. He doesn't really care about people, which is, as an anthropologist or someone like me who's even had any anthropology training, it seems like a strange discipline of choice. His whole mission is to understand the entire world and to translate the world into an ethnography that would explain everything. And yet he doesn't seem to care about people at all. He isn't given a life. Tom McCarthy doesn't work very hard to breathe sort of humanity into his character. And he doesn't intend to, so I can't say that the novel fails on that account. But certainly it makes it less of a wide-ranging and less of an interesting interrogation into anthropology. That's one of the things I've been doing at Santa Maddalena. The other thing, I've been trying to write short stories. I've been trying to move to fiction in the same way as I felt behind when I started writing my book. I didn't know how to write nonfiction. I feel like I'm at the very beginning again, trying to learn how on earth you're meant to write short stories. So I've been reading a lot of Lucia Berlin, Mary Gateskill, and George Saunders, and I've been trying to play with what I've learned from anthropology. So that sense of the distance between the author and the narrator, or the author and their subject. And I've been trying to dramatize that within the writing. So often the person who's telling the story, it will break because how can they know the people that they're writing about? Or it will shift perspectives halfway through. So I'm trying to see if I can use that anthropological eye or style in my own writing. And it's been really exciting to explore that.